Why not say 5%? Let's just stay, let's be humble and not say a lot. 5%. And if people argue 5% is too high, 2.5%, whatever the number is. Why not allocate that a portion of, in our trade agreement, that a portion of the product can remain in the third world, right? And that product can then be sold and they can create their own market, right? It doesn't have to be a large amount. It doesn't have to be a huge amount. But if we allow a portion of this product to remain in the third world, well, they have now the opportunity to have access to the very thing that they're creating. They now have the opportunity to sell that product and to create profit for themselves. It will not be an economic threat to the first world because 95% of the product is coming back, right? 5% of the product isn't going to be able to compete on the open market. So there's not any fear of competition here, right? It's not like they're going to take the product and overpower the first world. But what they will have is they'll have something very small. So why not in our trade agreement, rather than saying all of the product, and I think it was called the Malkia Decree, I can't remember the name of it, I did some research on NAFTA once, and I want to say Malkia Decree, I can't remember the name of the decree, but that specific decree stated that the product, and there's many, I've read this in times, I've seen this pattern in all the literature that I'm reading, is that the products always have to come back. 100% of the product has to come back to the first world. Why not allow a very small portion of the product to stay in the third world? I'd be happy if they even said 1%. That would make it seem as though at least there's an effort being made, right? I think 1% might be a little too meager, but why not? The big complaint is oh well, everybody's knocking neoliberalism. Everybody's saying that it's worse, and I haven't heard anyone propose new ideas. Well, here's a new idea, right? Here's a new idea. I don't know who watches my videos, but hopefully someone with some type of influence could watch this and be like, oh yeah, that's maybe we can do that, right? But what's going to prevent people from doing that? That's what it boils down to. Just plain old greed, right? There isn't any fear of competition, right? There isn't any fear of competition. This cannot compete with this. There won't be any competition. But there will be enough here to revamp this market. This market will be able, just with a meager actual investment, not an investment in labor, but by allowing people who've actually manufactured the product to retain the product and then sell the product and earn their own profits. But what you'll see is that they'll be making their money on labor, right? They'll be working for the corporation. They'll invest their time with the corporation. They'll exchange their labor for 25 cents an hour willingly. But at the end of that, they'll have a little bit left for themselves so that they can have a second source of income, right? Because in the United States and in the first world, you have this idea of diversifying your portfolio, right? So that there's one portfolio, but there are multiple avenues at which revenue is generated, right? Revenue is generated from all these sources, right? You have a hedge fund if you got $1 million, right? You've got your investment, you got your 401k, you've got your job, you've got like a side, dream thing that you're doing, trying to make money on the internet, and so on and so on and so forth. All of this is being pooled into one investment, right? Into one portfolio. In the third world, we don't think that they should have the same opportunity. Is that what's being argued? That they should only have labor? Is that what we're arguing? That they should only have labor? We should have all this diversification, and they should just have this sort of one means of getting paid, exchanging their labor at 25 cents an hour for a product that they can't even purchase. Is that fair to look at only having one source of revenue here, whereas all of this is diversified? All these different channels are being brought into one portfolio, right? There are many different opportunities, and they're all brought into this one portfolio. Whereas here, all we have is just an exchange of labor for a product, right? That's the only thing that they're allowed to have. Why not allow them the opportunity to have an additional source of revenue, something to contribute to their portfolio that wasn't there before, by allowing them to incorporate this product, right? It's a very small percentage. It's only 1% or 2% or 5% or 10%, but something, and make sure you safeguard that in the trade agreement, right? Why not put that in the trade agreement and then say that in the trade agreement, instead of saying that all of the product has to come back to the first world, that some of the product will be able to be retained in the third world, and you too will have the opportunity to have an additional source of income, right? Because obviously this product can then be sold for a profit, right? As it should be, because these are the very people who created the product in the first place, right? That's what's important, is the recognition of the act, the creative act. They have exchanged their labor and time to create a product. They should, by every account, have the opportunity to profit from that product as well. Why is it that we can do it and they can't, right? And everyone says, oh, there's no way to solve this problem. This is the best system in place. You know, there's no room for refinement. Here's a room to refine the process, right? This is an opportunity wherein the process can be refined. Why not implement it? Well, the reason why it hasn't been implemented, I'm sure I'm not the first person to have thought of this, is because of greed, right? A second source, the attempt to try and diversify within the third world, needs to be discussed and needs to be recognized because it's assumed in the first world, right? And here is a very concrete, a very simple, a very effective way of creating a change, and all that needs to be done is a signature. That's it, right? That's it. There's nothing more complicated than that. There's no petitioning, there's no boycotting, there's no revamping the market, there's no heady politics or antics. You don't have to publish 25 papers on this, write a whole book about it. You can do it right now by ensuring that a percentage of the product that's manufactured in the third world will remain in the third world, and allow the individuals who created the product the opportunity to profit from their own creation. I think it's only fair. Okay, with that being said, this concludes my discussion on neoliberalism in the first and the third world. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and hopefully we'll be able to sort of get the word out and start making demands, because if the system never changes, we're always going to have exploitation of the third world laborers. We know what it does for the first world. We know the profit that is generated here, but there's a lot of exploitation that goes on in the third world. And I think if you have employees who know that they have a stake in the corporation, even if they're third world employees, that they have the potential as individual workers to be able to have the product that they actually produce, right? That there's some benefit for them aside from this meager exchange of capital for labor, then you'll probably have a better workforce, right? You'll probably have a more productive workforce. You'll have people who will say, you know what, I don't mind working for the 25 cents an hour because there's a potential to make a little bit more money here. And with respect to the market, this doesn't present a threat to the 99% or the 95% over here, because it's not enough to compete. But I think it's important that at least the discussion begin, and that we start to take into account the plight of other people, and also to recognize the privileges, right? This is a privilege that we just don't think is a privilege. We think this is natural. This isn't a natural state of affairs. This state of affairs is manufactured. It is a consequence of our policies. It is a consequence of our greed. It is a consequence of our practices. And if we say it's good enough for us in the first world, then this same idea of diversification should be good enough in the third world. And we need to make sure that we contribute capital in our own interests, into the third world so that they too can diversify. Because the possibility of diversification makes for more willing employees, makes for harder workers. That's what built America, right? The idea that I can get a paycheck from my corporation, but I can also invest in the stock in my same corporation and have another stream of income. I can then take some of the products that's been manufactured from my corporation and ideas and expand through innovation is something that made this possible. We need to recognize that it's time for the third world to have the same abilities, right, that we have in the first, and that it's only fair. Otherwise, the system is completely corrupt. It's completely based on greed, and eventually the whole thing will collapse, right? And that's in part, I would argue, why we are in the situation we are now. It's for a failure to see this. But enough of the rambling. I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy days to watch my videos. Hopefully this has sparked some interest, and hopefully good debate and good discussion. Thanks again. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Goodbye.